Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. I don't know why I need to speak after Maimuna just spoke. That was actually a great keynote speech. May Allah have mercy on Salima Auntie and all of our parents who are not with us today. And those of us who are still caring for our parents in their old age, may we all be blessed in providing that caretaker role. I also want to give a quick shout out to Leslie, my other bestie. Congratulations, Leslie. You've been the executive director for about a year now, and I just, as what I'm studying as a doctoral candidate is Muslim women-led nonprofit organizations, and so I know that this organization is coming into a real next growth stage, and I'm so excited that it's under your leadership. So, congratulations. Now, for over 2 decades, I have been privileged with serving as a supporter, a speaker, a donor for the Islamic Resource Group, sharing my faith and traditions with educational institutions, workplaces, and many communities across Minnesota. Now, IRG opened several doors for me. For example, I believe in 2004, maybe, I worked with Professor Amy Popinga from Bethel University, who has invited me several times to come engage with her students. Dr. Susan Myers, I know you're here from St. Thomas University. You invite me to take back the narrative of who Muslim women are, especially our power and the legacy that we come from. To corporate spaces where I helped launch the first interfaith employee business network. Brother Tamim, you remember coming to that conversation several years ago. And to countless conversations that moved me from corporate America to now the nonprofit sector. And as IRG prepares to celebrate its 25th anniversary, which I know you probably were confused by the math, but the math adds up in 6 weeks, so stay tuned. I was joking with Sister Amina that it's 25 years running, and if you're Desi, you understand what that means. But inshallah, I want to talk about what those 25 years have taught us about bridge building. Not just talking about building bridges, but really actually now crossing them. So civil rights scholar John A. Powell, he writes about the difference between othering and belonging, between breaking and bridging. He says we live in a world that primes us to see differences as a threat, whether it's race, gender, religion, or political orientation. This othering creates breaking moments when people are excluded or treated as less than for being perceived as different. I have lived this. I think many of us have lived this othering, right? Post 9/11, I became the other. The one who needed to be understood, explained, sometimes defended, or even saved. But Powell offers another path, bridging. Bridging is a mindset where we commit ourselves to treat all people like they belong, where we honor differences instead of fearing them, where we co-create a world where everyone has a place. Tonight, I want to show you what bridging looks like in practice through the lens of interfaith philanthropy. So let's talk about what is philanthropy, okay? We'll start with just understanding that philos is the Greek word for love, and anthropos is the Greek word for humanity. So philanthropy literally means love of humanity. This love traditionally motivates us to give our time, our talent, and our treasure to improve human conditions. But as a Muslim, I've come to understand that our philanthropy flows from a deeper source. It's not just love of humanity that drives us, it's love of God that compels us to love and serve humanity. Now, this distinction matters because it transforms philanthropy from an optional good deed into a real spiritual obligation, from charity to worship, from something we do when convenient into something we cannot not do. In Islam, we have zakat, obligatory giving, similar to tithing in Christian traditions, or sadaqah in the Jewish tradition. We have sadaqah, which is voluntary charity as acts of devotions, and we have this beautiful verse in the Quran: whoever saves of life, it is as if they have saved all of humanity. When philanthropy is worship, you don't just write checks. You invest deeply. You build lasting relationships, you share your time, your talents, your resources, your connections, your voice, and you take action. And what I call this is like a framework of the 5 T's of philanthropy: time, talent, treasure, ties, and testimony. And here's what I've discovered over 2 decades of this work. The 5 T's are how we practice bridging. Each T is a plank in the bridge that moves us from dialogue to action, from othering to belonging, from breaking to building together. So let me show you what this means. The first T I'll talk about is time, right? In the early 2000s, after 9/11, the world looked at Muslims very differently. I was working in corporate America for a Fortune 500, and the atmosphere was thick with suspicion and fear towards my community. But something remarkable started to happen. A colleague named Paula, a Christian woman, came to me with vulnerability. She shared how the attacks had created fear in her about Muslims. But her pastor, Pastor Doug Cox, offered a session at their church aimed at fostering deeper understanding of Muslim neighbors. And Paula participated. And inspired by Pastor Doug's sincere engagement, she wanted to extend this knowledge to our workplace. Together with Pastor Doug and our Chief Marketing Officer, we co-delivered a presentation called Islam: Understanding Our Employees, Our Customers, and Our Communities. This became the springboard for launching our company's first interfaith employee business network. It was also where Dr. Tamim recruited me to become an IRG speaker. This is what bridging looks like in its earliest form: investing time and understanding. Not a one-time diversity training, but sustained engagement. Paula and Pastor Doug didn't just want to learn about Muslims, they wanted an ongoing relationship. Years later, Professor Amy at Bethel University, Dr. Susan Myers at the University of St. Thomas, and Professor Curtis DeYoung at Augsburg University invited me not once, but multiple times to engage with their students. They invested their time in creating spaces for Muslim voices in Christian higher education. This is bridging, the commitment to show up again and again. The literacy shift in Minnesota over the past 2 decades started here with IRG, with people willing to invest time from post-9/11 fear to curiosity, and from curiosity to relationship, from relationship to partnership. Now we'll talk a little bit about talent. It's like recognizing and celebrating the differences we all bring. As more people invested time, something else started to change. They began to see Muslim talents, not just Muslim needs. By 2016, I was working with the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition, JRLC. It is the largest interfaith public interest group in Minnesota at the time. Founded in 1971, JRLC was the first interfaith public interest lobby group in the United States, bringing together the Minnesota Council of Churches, the Jewish Community Relations Council, and the Islamic Center of Minnesota. Now, JRLC didn't just invite us to the table, they actually trained us. They taught us how a policy becomes a bill, how to advocate at the Capitol, and how to organize Days on the Hill. They recognized that Muslim women had talents in organizing, in mobilizing communities, in storytelling, and they invested in developing those gifts. This is when I founded RISE, Reviving the Islamic Sisterhood for Empowerment. Because through community conversations, Muslim women told me that they felt invisible, that they were doing the incredible work but had no platform, and to showcase their impact. They were contributing financially and physically to causes, but didn't understand why change wasn't sustainable. And one particular funder comes to mind, Mary's Pence. It's a Christian organization that invests in women across the United States and across America. Catherine Wojton, their executive director at the time, became one of my role models. She's a leader from the Christian faith, providing professional guidance to her sister from the Muslim faith. Mary's Pence provided the first funds to Rise and continued to open opportunities. They saw our talent and they invested in it. This is bridging at its best, recognizing that when Muslim women succeed, we all succeed. When we leverage the unique gifts each faith tradition brings, we create something none of us could have built alone. Now we'll move on to treasure. It's pooling our resources, not just our money, but other forms of wealth. And so as relationships deepened, something powerful happened. Through Protect Minnesota, a multi-faith coalition of Christians, Muslims, and Jewish neighbors, we came together to prevent gun violence. When Reverend Nancy Nord-Bentz, the executive director, asked if gun violence had affected me, I shared a story I carried for years. My dad's friend being held up at gunpoint and shot while his convenience store was being robbed. It devastated my family and his family and was a sad moment in our lives. And I didn't realize until that moment that gun violence had also touched my life too. Our coalition advocated for sensible gun legislation, universal background checks, safe storage requirements, preventing permitless carry. We pooled our treasure, financial resources, yes, but also our political capital, our community trust, and our collective voice. This is bridging through treasure, moving from separate giving within our silos to strategic shared investment. When we combine resources, we can tackle challenges no single community could address alone. And from treasure, let's talk about ties, the relationships that we hold. From this realm of advocacy, a fresh collaboration emerged that I'm particularly proud of. It was the Muslim and Jewish Women of Minnesota, MJWMN. Now, this organization wasn't actually a defined organization. It was like a volunteer association of women. But it brought together the National Council of Jewish Women of Minnesota and Rise. We went to the state capitol together, wielding our voices to champion vital causes, universal background checks, prevention of stand-your-ground bills that threatened our marginalized faith communities, increased representation of teachers of color in Minnesota schools, and menstrual equity. But here's what makes this powerful. Muslim and Jewish women are both targets of religious hate crimes. And according to the FBI, 18% of hate incidents are driven by religious animosity. Anti-Jewish hate crimes saw a 51% increase this year. Anti-Muslim hate crimes remain significantly above historical averages, and Muslim and Jewish women are disproportionately affected and targeted by these violent prejudices. Beyond the violence perpetuated against us, we face a problematic narrative that tries to pit our communities against each other. Harmful stereotypes attempt to convince us that our differences eclipse our collective strength. But data from the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding tells a different story. Among faith groups other than Muslims, Jews express the most favorable views of Muslims. 53% of Jews harbor positive views of Muslims, while only 13% report negative sentiments. And so as Muslim Jewish women of Minnesota operated as faith in action, we anchored our efforts in faith, knowing that our voices, when raised in unison, possess an impact far beyond what they might achieve separately. We practice bridging by staying in relation, even especially when it's hard. And I need to be honest with you, it is hard right now. Lately, bridging feels like it's been sort of breaking down. Our allies have shown us powerfully. Pastor Doug showed up after 9/11, Mary's Pence funding Rise, JRLC, including Muslim Voices, Christian and Jewish partners in gun violence prevention, taking heart iftars. As Imam Asad Zaman says, bridges get built not by facts, but by relationships, by interaction. by human interactions. These are bridges that hold. But the silence of Gaza from many who stood with us on other issues reveals where our belonging remains conditional, and the relationships with the JRLC group began to deteriorate. And in 2020, 24, 25, we witnessed in New York City and Minneapolis mayoral races becoming flashpoints for Islamophobia. Muslim candidates who followed all the rules, who did exactly what we were told to do in democracy, faced vicious attacks questioning whether Muslims belong in political leadership at all. And that's not something new. Think about what this means. We trained Muslims to caucus. We celebrated increased voter turnout. We cheered when Muslims ran for office. But when Muslims showed up not just as voters, but as leaders with power, the backlash was swift and severe. This is Powell's concept of breaking in real time. When a marginalized community moves from asking for belonging to claiming power, anxiety erupts. You can belong here, but not there. You can vote, but you cannot lead. You have a voice, but not too loud. Powell reminds us that bridging means treating all people like they belong, including Palestinians suffering violence and including Muslims exercising political power here at home. The question isn't whether we agree on every political issue. The question is, can we maintain our ties even in disagreement? Can we invest the time to understand why these issues matter so deeply? And can we use our talents and our treasure to advocate for all human dignity? This is the uncomfortable work of bridging, staying in relationship when it's the hardest. And this is where we need our allies the most. And the last T I'll talk about is testimony, creating shared stories of impact. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, we keep building. Our testimony, our collective stories matter. In 2023, Minnesota enacted bold reforms through the Communities Combating Hate Coalition, including our allies from the Jewish Community Action and the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. We passed Omnibus Bill SF 2909, which expanded the reporting of crimes motivated by bias, amended crimes of assault and property damage motivated by bias, required updated training for peace officers, and funded the Minnesota Department of Human Rights to enhance data collection and establish a bias response and community equity outreach team. A multiracial, multi-faith coalition drove this. Our testimony, our shared narrative of impact made this possible. And then there are quieter testimonies that matter just as much. The Muslim students at public schools who now get Eid holidays off, serving kosher and halal options at public cafeterias, the Muslim women who no longer get fired for wearing hijab at work, who can pray during their breaks, who can break their fast during Ramadan without hiding in bathroom stalls. This is what's possible when enough people commit to bridging. We shouldn't have to choose between our faith and full participation in our community. We belong fully and completely. Powell reminds us that bridging requires practice and grace when we fall short. So let's practice that right now. I'd like you to turn to someone near you and spend a few minutes discussing one of the three questions I'm going to pose to you. 1. Where have you experienced othering in your own life? How did it feel to be on the outside? 2. Think of a time when someone built a bridge to you. What did they do that made you feel like you belonged? Or 3, what's one small way you could practice bridging this week?